right, we're going to go ahead and get started here on this lesson that solves polynomial equations in factored form, and we need to be able to solve it in factored form because this is one step that you're going to need when you go to solve polynomial equations. Later on, you're going to factor polynomial equations in order to solve them, and so this is just one thing you need to know in order to do that. It's not real tough. It's not real challenging. If you just pay attention to what we're doing, you should be able to get this fairly easily. This says solve the equation. So you have x plus 3 on the left and you have x minus 1 on the right. And equals to 0. Well, we know that when we multiply two numbers to equal 0, one of those numbers must be 0. Is that correct? 3 times 0 equals 0. 0 times negative 5 equals 0. So it doesn't matter what we have as far as the other number. As long as we're multiplying by 0, we're going to get 0 as an answer. So that's the concept that you're using here. You're trying to make either this one times something is equal to 0, or you're going to do a number times 0 is equal to 0. So in order to do that, we just have to be able to set x plus 3 equal to 0, or set x minus 1 equal to 0, and then solve those. And it doesn't matter what this question mark is, because whatever it is, when you multiply it by 0, you're still going to get 0. And that's the whole goal of this. We're trying to figure out what we can plug in for x to get 0. So we say x plus 3 equals 0, x minus 1 is equal to 0. And then you solve this out. You're going to subtract 3 from both sides. So x is equal to negative 3. On the right one, you add 1 to both sides. So x is equal to positive 1. And that works because x equals 3. Plug it in there. Actually, it gets plugged in right there. Those two places. So x equals negative 3. So negative 3 plus 3 is the left parentheses, and the right parentheses says negative 3 minus 1. Does that equal 0? Negative 3 plus 3 is 0. Negative 3 minus 1 is negative 4. And yes, that does equal 0, because 0 times negative 4 is 0. So we know that this is a solution. Now let's try the other one. X equals 1. Plug it into both places for x. So we have 1 plus 3. And then you have 1 minus 1. Does that equal 0? 1 plus 3 is 4. 1 minus 1 is 0. And yes, that is true. 0 does equal 0. So it looks like we have our two answers. Our two answers to the problem: x equals 1 and negative 3. You can put and in between there if you wanted. You didn't have to use the comma. You could write the word and, or you can use a comma. Do not put parentheses around this, though, because we're not saying that this is an ordered pair. If you say 1, negative 3 like this, it's different than saying 1, negative 3 like that. Those are different. The top one talks about a point on the coordinate plane. The bottom one talks about solutions to this equation. All right, so let's look at this. What does this really mean? You've done this before. You've done this using the quadratic formula, and you have done this using solve quadratic equations by graphing. Those are the two lessons that you've done this, and this is a different way to do it. If it's already in factored form or you want to factor it. Let me show you what you're looking at. Here's the equation from the last problem. X plus 3 in the first parentheses, x minus 1 in the second parentheses, that's equal to 0. So that's the equation. I have multiplied those out, x squared, negative 1x, plus 3x, and negative 3. So I multiplied those out to get this equation now. And found the vertex, x equals negative b over top of 2a, plugged negative 1 back in to x, and I found y to be negative 4. And so the vertex is negative 1, negative 4, which is right here on the graph, negative 1, negative 4. And then I went ahead and found the other points and graphed those. What I want you to look at is this part right here. You see what I'm circling up there? I changed the 0 to a y. And now what we're going to be looking at on the graph is when y is equal to 0. Y is equal to 0 at that point, and y is equal to 0 at that point. What are those values? Well, this is going to be a 1, 0, and this is a negative 3, 0. X is negative 3, x is 1 when y is equal to 0. So that's what you're trying to find. You're trying to find those roots. So x equals negative 3, x equals 1. Let's go back to our example and look at what we have. X equals negative 3, x equals 1. So I'm trying to show you that you can solve these by graphing. You can solve these if they're in factored form. So a couple different ways to solve them. You also know quadratic formula. And soon you will know how to factor that x squared plus 2x minus 3 is equal to y. You'll soon know how to factor that into what we're working with now. All right, so let's move on to this one here. If you have k times k plus 7, remember you have two factors here. You have k and you have k plus 7. So the first one has to be equal to 0, or you have to make this second one equal to 0. Well, the one on the left's already solved. K equals 0. The one on the right, subtract 7 from both sides of the equal sign, so k is equal to negative 7. So k is going to be equal to 0, negative 7 are your two answers for k. I want you to look at this problem here. I want you to go ahead and try and solve that out. See if you can come up with those two solutions, and I will work that out for you. All right, you should have k minus 2 equals 0 and k plus 1 equals 0. On the left side, add 2 to both sides, so k is equal to 2. On the right side, subtract 1 from both sides, so k should be equal to negative 1. So your solutions, k is equal to 2 or negative 1, and negative 1. Or it's going to be, it can either be one or the other. It's not going to be both numbers at the same time. Looking at this one, it says solve the equation. Um, solve the equation. There are a couple different ways to do this. I will show you. I'll show you one way on this one, and then I'll show you the other way on the other one. So you know that y plus 9, all that squared is just going to be y plus 9 times y plus 9. And just like we have learned in this lesson, you set the first factor equal to 0, and you set the second factor equal to 0. Subtract 9, y equals negative 9. Subtract 9, y equals negative 9. And you notice that they're the same answer. Y equals negative 9. You just need to put one negative 9 there because we know that it's the same. Looking here at this one, you know the opposite of squaring is taking the square root. So the square root and squaring cancel each other out. So we have g minus 4 is equal to the square root of 0, which is 0. Add 4 to both sides. So g is equal to 4. And if you had worked this out, like we did in the previous example, you would have gotten two answers. Both of them would have been positive 4. And let's look at this one. If you have 3 factors now, we're not dealing with 2, we're dealing with 3 of them. And it's no different. You just set each factor equal to 0. And now let's solve these. The one on the far left, 3r plus 5. Well, we're going to subtract 5 from both sides. So we have 3r is equal to negative 5. And then we divide each side by 3. So we are left with r is equal to negative 5/3. In the middle, add 3 to both sides. R is equal to positive 3. And on the far right side, 5r plus 6 is equal to 0. Subtract 6 from both sides. So 5r is equal to negative 6. Divide both sides by 5. So r is equal to negative 6/5. So you have your 3 solutions. R is equal to negative 5/3, 3, and negative 6/5. Those are your 3 solutions. That's where the graph crosses the x-axis at those 3 values. In this case, the variables are, so we would say that it crossed the r-axis is what we would be saying there. Let's go to the last one here. Go ahead and try this one on your own. Work this out, and I will work it out. And you can check your solution with mine. Make sure you are getting this. So the first parentheses, a minus 7 equals 0. The second parentheses, 3a plus 4 is equal to 0. And the last parentheses, 2a minus 1, that's equal to 0. And let's work these out. We're going to start on the far left. Add 7 to both sides. A is equal to 7. In the middle, 3a plus 4 equals 0. We're going to subtract 4. So then we get 3a is equal to negative 4. Divide both sides by 3. So a is equal to negative 4/3. And on the right one, we're going to add 1 to both sides. So we're left with 2a is equal to 1. Divide by 2, divide by 2. So a is equal to 1/2. So let's go ahead and write our answers. A is equal to 7, negative 4/3, and 1/2. Those are your 3 solutions. Well, that's all we have for solving polynomials in factored form. We are coming up to the lessons on factoring equations. So you're going to need this when you start solving equations by factoring. We'll see you next time.